Qatar is the wealthiest country on the planet. Their citizens enjoy a higher GDP per capita than the Swiss, or indeed any of the nationals from any of the other oil-rich monarchies. But today we are not going to talk about this. In fact, the most important fact of this country is not their wealth, nor their absolute monarchy, or their ties with radical terrorist groups. Beyond any doubt, what made this country famous can be summarized in just two words, and those words are Al-Jazeera. It is the most influential TV network in the Arab world and one of the most important news networks on the entire planet. At the beginning of the 1990s, the royal family that rules Qatar with an iron fist, the Al Thani house, had a dream. They wanted to turn their nation into the hegemonic leader in the region. But the question was, how could they achieve this goal? I mean, we're talking about a tiny country with a smaller population than the city of Chicago. Of course, they couldn't rival Saudi Arabia in the military field, and Sharia law made it impossible to be a financial powerhouse. Further, their geographical position was nothing special either. There was only one possible strategy, and that was the idea of so-called soft power. In other words, influence, diplomacy, and, well, propaganda. Since then, Qatar has invested more than any other country in improving their image to outsiders by doing things like hosting the Soccer World Cup in 2022, a Formula One race, and even directly sponsoring soccer teams. But among all these projects, the most successful and famous of them all has to be their TV network, Al Jazeera. They are the market leader in terms of audience in the entire Arab world. In fact, their market share surpasses all of their rivals put together. And this is all despite the fact that the channel is banned in most countries. Al Jazeera has led to the overthrow of governments in several nations. They have amplified the effect of the Arab Spring, and they've even become the unofficial loudspeaker for some terrorist groups. Since the attacks of September the 11th, Al Jazeera has become, in many ways, the only source of information for understanding what is going on in some parts of the world. Even CNN buys their footage. In other words, they are a respected media institution. But then again, you might wonder, well, isn't Al Jazeera just a state propaganda channel? I mean, to what extent should we really trust their information? And importantly, what's their ideology? Well, today we are going to answer all of these questions, but before we do that, let's take a look at some history.
The importance of being unique.
In 1995, the BBC closed their Arab channel because the Saudi government wanted to interfere in their editorial process. 150 journalists got fired, all of them Arab journalists who were trained at one of the most prestigious media organizations in the world. These people had a deep knowledge of Muslim culture, but at the same time, they couldn't meet the high standards of Western media. This is where the Emir of Qatar at the time, Hamad Al Thani, comes in. Al Thani had just come to power and had a clear vision for his country. He wanted it to become the leader of the Islamic world. In order to achieve that, those 150 unemployed journalists were given an opportunity. As soon as they lost their jobs, Qatar offered them brand new ones. Now, what was their mission? Well, that was to create a brand new news network, an Arab-speaking media outlet that would meet the quality of Western media at any cost. Qatar's government gave them a $147 million loan, and with that, this team of 150 journalists could buy state-of-the-art studios, have correspondents in many countries, and broadcast through a satellite. Every little detail was taken care of. For example, to design their logo, the Emir made a public contest. Finally, this one, the one that you see on the screen now, was the winner, and as you can see, it reads Al Jazeera in Arabic. Finally, in 1996, Al-Jazeera, that means the island in Arabic, started broadcasting to the Arab world. In very little time at all, they surpassed the rest of their rivals. Think about it. I mean, back in the day, Arab TV was extremely boring. In this part of the world, freedom of expression doesn't really exist, and therefore TV news just offered official announcements. Al Jazeera was different. They had no problem with criticizing various politicians and royal families. They showed corruption scandals, and they even interviewed political dissidents. All of this was done in a dynamic style that had never been seen on Arabic television before. Nevertheless, the real turning point for Al Jazeera was 9/11. Osama bin Laden used this TV network to broadcast his claim to the terrorist attack. All of a sudden, the name Al Jazeera was being said on TV news around the world. But not only that, a month after the terrorist attack, the American government declared war on Afghanistan. Back then, all the big media corporations like CNN or CNBC had correspondents in Tokyo, London, or Berlin, but no one had thought Kabul would be that newsworthy. And, well, guess who did have an office in the Afghan capital? Yup, that would be Al Jazeera. Since they were a channel targeted to the Muslim world, they had correspondents in all of the Muslim countries. Suddenly, Al Jazeera footage was appearing on televisions all around the world. This is why, in 2004, the Emir of Qatar realized that what he had not only was a powerful tool to reach the Arab world, but indeed the world at large. And this is how English Al Jazeera was born, and it was ready to broadcast into the most competitive media market in the world, the United States of America. Since then, Al Jazeera has become the TV news that talks about countries that never appear on American TV news. Want to know about Africa? Well, tune into Al Jazeera. What about the Middle East? Again, go to Al Jazeera. Central Asia? Yeah, you're beginning to get the picture. But do wait a minute, because things are not quite as great as they seem to be. Don't forget, we are talking about a TV network that is being paid for by a government in order to influence other countries. Starting to sound a bit like it might be propaganda. Well, let's dive a little bit deeper.
Islam's enfant terrible.
As we said before, Al Jazeera was the first Arab TV network that openly criticized the governments of other countries.
We started the revolution back in 2011.
And rather unsurprisingly, this was not always welcome, especially given that most of these other countries are dictatorships. So, in 2011, an uprising in Tunisia started out, and the dictator of this nation abandoned it. All of these facts could have had little to no impact abroad, but Al Jazeera had deep coverage of this uprising so that it could be seen in other countries. Since it was a satellite station, their signal was arriving to sets all across North Africa and the Arabian Peninsula. This is how the inhabitants of other countries next to Tunisia, like Egypt, saw their neighbors protesting and thought, wait a minute, we've also got a dictator. Couldn't we do something just like that? And of course, nearly every person in opposition to Mubarak had a news show that they could now watch. And of course, this was not something that went over brilliantly with those dictators.
Al Jazeera shut down in Egypt as Mubarak fights for control of airwaves.
But, well, what exactly is the problem here? Well, censoring a satellite TV station is harder than it seems. Of course, you can forbid it if you want, but if someone wants to access the station and they have a satellite dish, then technically it's possible.
If you are having problems receiving any Al Jazeera channels, this guide will take you through the process of tuning your satellite receiver.
So, in a matter of months, all of these Arab citizens were seeing their neighboring countries overthrowing their dictators, and this explains, in part, the Arab Spring phenomenon. But wait a minute again, because not everything is perfect. Of course, Al Jazeera helped to finish off a lot of dictatorships, but the truth is the people they promoted on their network were not really any more democratic.
For years, the Muslim Brotherhood's spiritual leader was given his own television show on Al Jazeera.
Even Daesh, the Islamic State, was portrayed by Al Jazeera as just an opposition force to al-Assad in Syria, and even as a group of moderate rebels. The same happens with other Sunni radical terrorists like Al-Qaeda. And now you might be wondering, is Al Jazeera a network that stands for radicalism and against the West? Well, the truth is, they've also been accused of just the opposite. Just ask the Emir of Bahrain and his government.
Minister of Information Nabil Al-Hamr told journalists that Al Jazeera's correspondence had been banned from Bahrain. Al-Hamr claimed that the station was a medium for, quote, Zionist infiltration of the Gulf region.
Surprised? Well, for many, Al Jazeera is Zionist Western propaganda, while for others, it's the TV station of the radicals. In fact, the only common ground for Al Jazeera when it comes to ideology is the interests of the ones who finance them, the royal house of Al Thani, who, by the way, don't support freedom of speech in their own country.
WikiLeaks cables claim Al Jazeera changed coverage to suit Qatari foreign policy.
Nevertheless, this doesn't mean they cannot show the dark side of Qatar. In fact, despite being paid for by the royal house, Al Jazeera is more independent than many other state-sponsored news networks. For instance, what you see on the screen here are extracts from a talk show about the near slave-like working conditions suffered by immigrants who work in Qatar as construction workers. In this show, foreign trade unionists were invited and had the chance to openly criticize the Al Thani family and their policies. In other words, Al Jazeera's directors are smart enough to limit their propaganda and not lose their audience. Of course, they have an ideology and a lot of interests to meet, but they are all aware that in today's world you cannot silence the reality of what's happening, because if you don't tell it, others are going to tell it for you. At the end of the day, Al Jazeera is forbidden in almost all countries in the region, including Saudi Arabia. Nonetheless, they are still the most influential and most watched TV network. Everyone knows who pays for them, but at the same time, they are the only source for many news topics. In fact, the Al Jazeera model has lots of copycats. In 2003, the Saudis founded their own channel, Al Arabiya. Further, the American government has their own Arabic-speaking network called Ahara. And what about Iranian TV? Hispan TV is a Spanish-speaking network paid for by the Iranian government in order to influence the Hispanic world. They also have an English-speaking channel called Press TV. In 2005, Russia launched Russia Today, also known as RT. While Al Jazeera keeps exploring new possibilities. Their latest creation is A+J, a Facebook page where they share viral news. And now our question goes to you, and that would be, do you think you'd stop watching Al Jazeera because you think it's propaganda, or will you keep enjoying their shows while maybe adding a pinch of salt? You can leave me your answer in the comment section below, I'd love to hear it. And also, talking about propaganda, we've got another video where we talk about why Putin is so popular among Russians. If you want to watch that, please do click on that link. And also, do not forget to visit our friends from ReconsiderMedia.com who provided the voice in this video that isn't mine. Also, if you liked this video, please do give it a thumbs up, and don't forget that we publish brand new videos every Monday and every Thursday, so just hit that subscribe button, do not miss any post. And as always, I'll see you in the next video.
And if you want to learn more about politics and hear even more of my lovely voice, you can join us at Reconsider Media. We have a podcast at reconsidermedia.com/podcast. See you there.